persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators is one of the darkest chapters in history and will always be a scar on humanity. We honor the resilience of survivors, and we rededicate ourselves to uphold the sacred promise of never again. We promise to always remember those who lost their lives and those who saved them, those who stood in the face of such evil and refused to turn a blind eye. May we always remember and always pledge never again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, President Trump took the oath of office flanked by the richest people in the world. His inauguration guests are reported to be worth over $1.3 trillion. At the same time, the Republican let-them-eat-cake agenda is pushing to take money out of the pockets of hardworking Americans. These proposals, and you can't make this stuff up, that Republicans have been floating at Mar-a-Lago would slash the food budgets of 40 million hungry families by a third. These are the people who claim that they care about food prices, the ones who want to make it harder for low-income school districts to serve free meals to kids, all so they can give tax breaks to the billionaire ruling class. Newsflash for the President and Republicans in Congress. You cannot make America healthier if you take away people's health care and make it impossible to buy nutritious food. Billionaires do not need help, Mr. Speaker. Regular Americans do. I beg you, drop these proposals. Work with Democrats to improve programs that help regular people get by and stop making hunger worse in this country. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to recognize the outstanding achievement of the Spotswood High School girls cross-country team, who won the VHSL Class 3 state championship in Blacksburg last November. The incredible accomplishment caps years of hard work. In the last 3 seasons, the Blazers placed 4th, 3rd, and finally runners-up. But they took home the trophy this year with 3 athletes finishing in the top 10, Marika Dickel, Ashlyn Dickel, and Haley Mancini. These all-star honorees were joined by their teammates Carla Argetta Romero, Raina Dickel, Peyton Joyner, Anna Lowe, Mary-Kate Miller, and Lillian Myers. The team combined to score a total of 49 points for first place. They were led by assistant coach Margene Dobbins and head coach Sue Rinker. Coach Rinker's expertise and consistent leadership earned her the well-deserved Coach of the Year award from Miles Stat. Congratulations again to Spotswood Blazers girls cross-country state champions. Their victory reflects not only the talent and determination of each runner, but also the dedication and support of their coaches, families, and the entire community. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the extraordinary life of Rose Marie Sickler of Clarence Center, New York, who passed away on December 3rd, 2024. Born on July 19th, 1948, to Joseph and Lillian Labuda, Rose grew up in the town of Tonawanda, attended Cardinal O'Hara High School, Medaille College, and earned her master's in elementary education from Buffalo State College. For 30 years, Rose served as a beloved kindergarten teacher in the Depew Central School District. She dedicated her career to shaping the lives of hundreds of students with her joyful heart, innovative programs like the annual Penguin Hop, and her deep commitment to nurturing young minds. A devoted wife to Charles for over 50 years, a loving mother to Dr. James Sickler and Dr. Thomas Sickler, and a steadfast supporter of numerous charitable causes, Rose's kindness and selflessness knew no bounds. Rose faced her final battle with cancer with grace and courage, leaving behind a legacy of love, compassion, and inspiration for all who knew her. May she rest in peace, and may her family find comfort in the memories of her life. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Iowa seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to wish my best bud and my nephew a happy 15th birthday. Today is the actual day. Happy birthday, Andrew. I hope you have a wonderful day. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to rise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, January is National Mentorship Month, and it's the perfect time to highlight the transformative work of the Epsilon Sigma Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. With their Alpha Academy Leadership Development Program, which serves male students from Edgecombe, Nash, Halifax, and Wilson counties. They're empowering middle and high school students in Eastern North Carolina through 3 core pillars: leadership, mentorship, and scholarship. Since its inception, the Alpha Academy has impacted over 200 young men, continuously shifting life narratives and opening doors to a brighter future. These young men have engaged in impactful local and global service projects, from turkey drives and Socktober, impacting areas such as Haiti and as far as Tanzania. During National Mentorship Month, we celebrate the Alpha Academy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, President Donald Trump became the 47th President of the United States. He has immediately fulfilled his promises made, promises kept on behalf of the American people with executive orders restoring common sense. Led by the President, Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republicans are delivering an opportunity and freedom agenda by putting America first again, by working to cut taxes and ensure Americans keep more money in their pockets, creating jobs, secure the border to make American families safe again, unleash all the above energy for American energy independence, and to provide for peace through strength with the American military. In conclusion, God bless our troops as the global war on terrorism continues. Open borders for dictators puts all Americans at risk of more 9/11 attacks imminent, as warned by the FBI. Trump is reinstituting existing laws to protect American families with peace through strength. Americans appreciate the people of Venezuela standing up to the Maduro dictatorship. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today because it is the 52nd anniversary of the Roe v. Wade decision, and reproductive freedom and the lives and well-being of countless women in this country is under attack. We are 1 week into the Trump administration, and House Republicans are already introducing draconian legislation to strip away the reproductive rights of women. This legislation will exacerbate the growing crisis in reproductive health care, driving OBGYN doctors out of the profession and endangering the health of women. This cannot stand. As the father of a 12-year-old daughter, I refuse to let her grow up in a world where she has fewer freedoms than the generations that came before her. That is why I'm proud to announce that I've joined the Reproductive Freedom Caucus. As a California state senator, I led legislation to protect and expand reproductive rights and abortion access, and I'm proud to take up this fight in Congress. Every person deserves the autonomy to make their own health care decisions, and we must continue to do everything we can to restore reproductive freedom and move our country forward. Women, not politicians in Washington, D.C., should be making their decisions on when, whether, and how to start a family. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with a heart full of appreciation and gratitude as I say goodbye to many of the communities in Alabama's 2nd Congressional District that I've had the privilege of representing over the years. On the plains of southeast Alabama is the city of Troy, nestled on the northern outskirts of Montgomery, is beautiful Wetumpka. At the end of the 118th Congress, I said goodbye to both of my beloved district offices in those cities. As I reflect on my time in serving South Alabama, it is not only the legislative victories and achievements that come to mind, but of our constituent services and successes. The generosity and warm welcome from the cities of Troy and Wetumpka, Mayor Jason Reeves and Mayor Jerry Willis, have allowed me and my team to grow and work diligently for the citizens of Alabama's 2nd Congressional District to achieve many victories. To my staff who have helped me in every step of the way, particularly Bill Harris and John Cox, who staffed those offices, thank you. Your hard work and your passion for public service have allowed me benefits, dollars, and recognitions to be restored to the citizens. To the people of Alabama's 2nd, I am forever grateful for the trust you placed in me and the successes we achieved together. To my commitment to serving Alabama remains steadfast. I will continue to carry the friendships and warmth to these communities in my new Alabama 1st Congressional District. Thank you once again for your kindness, your unwavering support. It has been an honor to serve you. May God continue to bless Alabama's 2nd Congressional District, the state of Alabama, and the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Republican Conference, I send to the desk a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 54.
Resolution be considered as read and printed in the record.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. Without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democrat caucus, for privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 55. Resolved that the following name
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with, and without objection, the resolution is agreed to and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The Chair announces the Speaker's appointment pursuant to 15 U.S.C. 1024A and the order of the House of January 3rd, 2025, the following members on the part of the House to the Joint Economic Committee.
Mr. Swikert of Arizona and Mr. Beyer of Virginia.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 53 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 1, House Resolution 53. Resolved that at any time after adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill H.R. 471 to expedite under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 and improve forest management activities on National Forest System lands, on public lands under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management, and on tribal lands, to return resilience to overgrown, fire-prone forested lands and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources or their respective designees. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. No amendment to the bill shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit. Section 2. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House Bill Senate 5 to require the Secretary of Homeland Security to take into custody aliens who have been charged in the United States with theft or for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill and on any amendment thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one. 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees. And 2, one motion to commit.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for purposes of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, last night the Rules Committee met and reported a rule, House Resolution 53, providing for consideration of 2 measures. H.R. 471, the Fix Our Forests Act, to be considered under a structured rule. The rule provides for 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on Natural Resources or their respective designees, provides for 1 motion to recommit, and makes 2 amendments in order. Additionally, the rule provides for consideration of S5, the Lake and Riley Act, under a closed rule. The rule provides for 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees, and provides for 1 motion to recommit. Mr. Speaker, we're here today to debate a rule on 2 timely pieces of legislation, beginning with H.R. 471, the bipartisan Fix Our Forests Act. Mr. Speaker, according to the U.S. Forest Service, more than 1 billion acres of forest land are at risk of wildfire. Further, nearly 1/5 of all land overseen by the federal government is at high or very high risk of wildfire. Now, this didn't happen overnight. It's a result of a buildup of bureaucratic red tape, burdensome regulations, and frivolous litigation that have prevented forest management activities like thinning, prescribed burning, and mechanical treatment. What we're left with are dangerous wildfires occurring at record levels and intensities. It doesn't have to be this way, though, Mr. Speaker, and the Fix Our Forest Act takes the proper steps toward restoring forest health, increasing resiliency to catastrophic wildfires, and protecting communities. It does so by reforming NEPA to expedite environmental reviews, reducing frivolous lawsuits, and increasing the pace and scale of forest restoration projects. Additionally, H.R. 471 promotes federal, state, tribal, and local collaboration to the creation of a new Fireshed Center, and it will provide agencies with new technologies and other critical tools which allow a quicker response to wildfires and the ability to implement the most vital forest management projects immediately. As we're unfortunately seeing more frequently, active forest management techniques and a focus on forest health are needed now more than ever, and this bipartisan product is a step in the right direction. Moving on, Mr. Speaker. The rule also provides for the consideration of S5, the Lake and Riley Act, another bipartisan piece of legislation. Mr. Speaker, Lake and Riley was murdered in my home state of Georgia in February of 2024 by a Venezuelan man who was illegally present in the United States. He previously crossed our southern border in September of 2022, where he was paroled and released for further processing. Between arriving here and committing his heinous act, the individual was arrested in New York and then again in Georgia for stealing from a Walmart. At the time of Lake and Riley's murder, there was a bench warrant out for his arrest for failing to show up in court. Mr. Speaker, S5, the Lake and Riley Act, as amended, requires the Department of Homeland Security to issue a detainer for any individual inadmissible to the United States who is charged with, is arrested for, convicted of, admits having committed, or admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of any burglary, theft, larceny, shoplifting, assault of a law enforcement officer, or any crime that results in death or serious bodily injury to another person. Additionally, the bill grants the Attorney General of a state the power to hold future administrations accountable by providing standing to bring civil action against federal officials for the failure to enforce immigration statutes, including mandatory detention, individual parole authority, and visa sanctions. I'd like to commend my colleague from Georgia, Mike Collins, for his work on this legislation and send my condolences to Lakin's family. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to passing this bill in the House for the 3rd time and sending it to President Trump's desk. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts recognized for 30 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I thank the gentleman for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Republicans are bringing up a rule for two bills that will be debated on the floor this week. I look forward to that debate. But I feel compelled to focus on this majority's screwed-up priorities, which now include handing a get-out-of-jail-free card to KKK members, Proud Boys, and other criminals who violently beat cops within an inch of their lives on January 6, 2021. I mean, I thought this election was about lowering costs. What the hell happened? I thought it was about securing the border. I thought it was about making sure that our communities are safe. Not whatever the hell these pardons are. These pardons are sick. They are offensive. They are un-American. And I don't ever want to hear about law and order from your side again, Mr. Speaker, when your side is letting criminals back on the streets. Criminals who beat cops and tried to overthrow our government. 1,500 criminals, including over 600 who were charged with violently assaulting police officers. And I'm here to talk about that on the floor because I think it's disgusting. I think it's a disgrace. The people Trump let out broke through windows, beat up cops, and desecrated this beautiful symbol of our country. A building, by the way, that terrorists tried to destroy on September 11, 2001. They couldn't get here because they were stopped by the courageous people on board Flight 93. But the crowd that Donald Trump sent here breached the building, and they attacked it in a way that had never been done. It was a horrible, awful thing, what happened that day. I was in this chamber. I was in this room. I was in your chair, Mr. Speaker. I took over for Speaker Pelosi when she was evacuated. I was one of the last people off the floor, and I exited through those doors. And I saw the faces of the rioters smashing windows to try to get at us. They wanted to kill people, kill police, kill us. And I saw the walls they covered with feces. I saw them use flagpoles to beat police officers. I saw the fear in the eyes of my Republican colleagues as they cowered that day. And I saw the bravery of law enforcement that protected us. Mr. Speaker, how the hell do you guys walk into this place every day? How do you look the police officers in the eye? How do you do it, knowing the people who tried to kill them will walk free thanks to Donald Trump? These were brave officers who tried to hold the line against a violent mob. And let me tell you, they were outnumbered and they were overwhelmed because Donald Trump refused to lift a finger to help. The people he sent were not peaceful protesters. They were criminals, violent, angry, vicious people. They beat cops into the ground, leaving them bruised and battered. And now Donald Trump let them out of jail. And now he calls them heroes. He wants to invite them to the White House. We even had colleagues here who went to a D.C. jail to celebrate their release and complain they weren't being let out fast enough. This is unbelievable. This is an insult to every police officer in this country. It is an insult to the families of the people who died because of what happened, and an insult to the millions of Americans who believe in law and order, democracy, and decency. Trump is abandoning the blue. He could have chosen to let out only the nonviolent offenders, but he let out people who beat the cops, and that tells you all that you need to know. And I think my Republican colleagues owe it to us during this debate, the first time we are debating on the floor since the pardons, to come down and explain themselves. They owe America an explanation. Because the people I am talking to think those pardons are shameful and disgusting and wrong. And I'll wait for an answer, and I reserve my time.
Congressman reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as you know, we're here to discuss H.R. 471 and S5, and I now yield 3 minutes to my colleague from Texas, Mr. Roy.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
appreciate my friend from Georgia. We are here to debate the rule that we've adopted. Will take up important legislation involving ensuring our forests are no longer such that they're going to catch fire, as we're seeing happening in California, and importantly to deal with the Lake and Riley Act. Now, this is a bill that we passed off the House floor last year. It was rejected by the Democrat-led Senate. They refused to move it. We moved it last week here in the House floor and sent it over to this Senate, now a Republican Senate, after the voters spoke. The Senate amended it, made it, I believe, better, sent it to the House, and now that amended bill is on the floor of the United States House of Representatives. Now, let's remember what we're talking about. And this bill is named after Lake and Riley. My friend from Georgia just discussed the facts involving the unfortunate death of Lake and Riley at the hands of someone here illegally, someone here who had committed crimes. I had as my guest this weekend at the inauguration a woman named Alexis Nungare, a wonderful woman from Houston, Texas, whose 13-year-old little girl was murdered by people released into our country last year by the Biden administration. Now, fortunately, those policies are ending under President Trump. But here's the truth. Never again should any American, any Texan, any Georgian have to deal with what was thrust upon them by the Biden administration in terms of the damage, despair, death, destruction, murders, rapes that were perpetrated against the people we represent. This legislation would take a giant step forward to ensure that we can stop any future administration who's not just refusing to enforce federal law, but is actually abusing federal law to endanger our people, our citizens that we represent. This legislation would simply say that we must detain some of the worst people that are here illegally and ensure that they're not released. We're talking about serious bodily injury. We're talking about things that result in death, assaulting police officers. That's all in this legislation. But in addition, in this legislation is an important provision that I was proud to introduce with my friend Dan Bishop from North Carolina in the SUE Act to ensure that attorneys general can sue the federal government when the federal government is failing to do its job. Imagine the ability of Texas or North Carolina or Georgia or my colleagues to be able to say, you know what? Enough. The federal government does not get to ignore its fundamental duty under the Constitution to defend its citizens. And the attorneys general of states ought to be able to stop the federal government when it is endangering our people. This law would do that. This law would honor the memory of Lake and Riley. It would honor the memory of Jocelyn Nungare. It would honor the memory of the countless Americans who have lost their loved ones and been dealing with the scourge of illegal immigration, endangering our people. I proudly support it, and I proudly support this rule. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I think it takes a lot of nerve to come down here and talk to us about law and order when the gentleman who just spoke was at a D.C. jail celebrating the release of people who attacked and beat cops here in this Capitol, who almost killed them. Some died as a result of their injuries. And I know my Republican friends don't want to defend these parties because what the president did was indefensible. He couldn't release these people who attacked our police officers quick enough. He couldn't release them quick enough. You know, the Speaker of this House was asked about January 6th, about January 6th defendants like Daniel Rodriguez, who pled guilty to viciously injuring a police officer with a weapon. And the Speaker said, and I quote, "It is not my place. It is the president's sole decision. And he made a decision, so I stand with him on it." It's not your place? It's not your place? Mr. Speaker, it literally is your place. It is your place. Mr. Speaker, you preside over this House. You hire the sergeant at arms. You oversee the captain of the Capitol Police Force. If it isn't your place, then who the hell's place is it? I have a radical idea. How about you stand with the officers who were beaten and bloodied protecting you, rather than stand with a reality TV wannabe dictator? If your response to the question about the pardons of people who attacked and injured the officers that you oversee and are responsible for is, quote, "It's not my place," my question to you is this: who do you work for? Do you think you work for President Trump? I would suggest you do some soul searching. And while you're at it, maybe reread the United States Constitution. Because you don't work for Donald Trump. You are the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and it damn sure is your place to have an opinion on the people who beat the officers who protect you and this institution, having no consequences for beating men and women who protect this country. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities towards the President and direct their remarks to the Chair. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Colorado, Mr. Hurd.
Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Chairman Westerman for his common sense piece of legislation that we're discussing this afternoon. This is a new day in America. The days of forestry mismanagement are coming to an end. For far too long, our national forests and the communities that surround them have been at the mercy of unelected federal bureaucrats who have become beholden to misguided environmental policies. My district in Colorado is home to 6 of the state's 11 national forests. We've witnessed the destructive force of poor forestry management firsthand. The Multiple Use Sustained Yield Act of 1960 mandates that national forests be managed for multiple use. This includes outdoor recreation and timber management. Washington, D.C. has turned our national forests into national parks by bringing timber management to a standstill and setting the stage for the terrible disasters like those we have seen in California. We can no longer afford to ignore the safety and well-being of our communities. The Fix Our Forest Act lets the Forest Service do its job, restore forest health, increase wildfire resiliency, and protect communities like those in Colorado's 3rd District. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this legislation, and I ask my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and on final passage. I yield back.
Gentleman from Colorado yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, will anybody on that side come down and defend these pardons, which are indefensible? In any event, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to urge that we defeat the previous question, and I will offer an amendment to the rule to make an order, amendment number 1, to provide a permanent pay fix for federal wildland firefighters. We tried to get this made in order in the Rules Committee, but the Republicans said no to better benefits and a pay raise for the people who are fighting these fires. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment into the record along with any extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection.
And to discuss this proposal, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. I want to associate myself with his remarks condemning the unconscionable silence we hear across the aisle in the wake of these pardons of violent criminals, seditionists, thugs who should never be pardoned or celebrated, and yet that is exactly what is happening even here in the building that they desecrated. Turning to the bill at hand, one thing I hope we can agree on that is clearly missing from this bill is a permanent pay raise for federal wildland firefighters. These brave men and women put everything on the line. They deserve to be paid fair wages for the long hours, dedication, and sacrifice they're putting out. And the good news is that under Democratic leadership, Congress approved a pay raise in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The bad news is the authority to continue paying federal wildland firefighters the wages they deserve is about to run out because of partisan politics. Thanks to Republicans, the entire federal government is operating under a continuing resolution, a short-term patch that will expire March 23rd. Good luck hiring a federal firefighter right now with being underpaid to start with and having a looming pay cut because of partisan politics just weeks away. Fixing this should be an unequivocal bipartisan priority, and we have an opportunity to do it right now. That's why 2 of my Democratic colleagues filed amendments to address these issues. Unfortunately, the Rules Committee is refusing to allow a vote on the amendments from Representative Neguse and Representative Lee. That is a shame. A permanent pay raise is not merely a matter of fairness. It is a recognition of the invaluable service these frontline heroes provide. It's an investment in their future, ensuring they can provide for their families and have peace of mind knowing their sacrifices are valued. Instead of rushing this so-called Fix Our Forest Act to the floor to exploit a disaster in Los Angeles, we should be working to address a real problem and doing it together, doing right by our wildland firefighters. So in a few moments, Republicans will be moving the previous question to end debate on the rule. I urge my colleagues to vote against the previous question, because doing so, voting no, will allow Mr. Negus's Timbs Act to be brought forward instead of the Fix Our Forest Act, ensuring that federal wildland firefighters are getting the pay and benefits they deserve. That's the bill we should be considering, instead of a bill that rolls back our environmental laws and does nothing to help Los Angeles. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, or reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I too am concerned about some of the pardons that were issued. I can't fathom what was going through President Biden's mind when he pardoned his family members and any of his political allies this past week. And it's something that I think does merit much more discussion, in how someone just gives family members and political allies a blanket pardon when they had not yet been charged for the crimes that they had committed. Now, Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Michigan, Mr. Wahlberg.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Georgia. I rise today in support of the rule and the underlying bill, the Fix Our Forest Act. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I want to express my sincere condolences to the families who have lost loved ones and homes and history in the tragic fires in Southern California. Our hearts break for them, and our prayers continue to be with them. Today we have an opportunity to help mitigate future forest fires and protect not only homes and communities, but critical wildlife habitat. Proper forest management can, in fact, help prevent forest fires, and if we follow the science, as this legislation does, we can identify the top areas of concern and take action to address those fire sheds. This bipartisan legislation will empower states, local, tribal, and private partners to do critical wildfire prevention activities necessary to prevent the tragic fires we have just seen recently and in recent years. I also want to note that the legislation does not waive a single environmental law. Mr. Speaker, I'm a conservationist. Coming from the Great Lakes, the state of Michigan, I know the importance of clean air and clean water. What this bill does is streamline fragmented federal programs and makes the existing tools more flexible and efficient. By passing this legislation, we can help protect millions of acres from the threat of wildfires, save lives and livelihoods and history, and protect wildlife habitat for generations to come. I thank Chairman Westerman for his leadership on this critical legislation, and I urge support for the rule and the underlying bill. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Georgia just changed topics so quickly back to Biden. I have whiplash. I think I need a neck brace to be able to follow his logic here. Look, spare me your comparisons of Biden pardoning his family and Trump pardoning violent criminals that attacked police officers on January 6th. And you know what? You can be against both of those actions, but they're not the same, and they shouldn't even be mentioned in the same conversation. But let me tell you about the people that you can't seem to want to, that you continue to want to defend and who have been pardoned. Here are some of the convicted felons that Trump sent free on Monday. Stephen Cappuccio, convicted of 6 felonies, including assaulting a police officer, ripped off Metro police officer Daniel Hodges' gas mask, and at one point during the assault he said, and I quote, "How do you like me now, mother effer?" Pardoned by Donald Trump. David Dempsey, sentenced to 20 years. He stomped on police officers' heads, struck an officer in the head with a metal crutch, and attacked police with pepper spray and broken pieces of furniture. He also attacked a fellow rioter who was trying to disarm him, and he has a demonstrated history of political violence, pardoned by Donald Trump. Enrique Tarrio, sentenced to 22 years, former national leader of the Proud Boys, a domestic terrorist far-right militia. He was found guilty of seditious conspiracy, helped plan the January 6th attack, and made sure it was violent, pardoned by Donald Trump. Guy Reffitt, sentenced to 7 years and 3 months. He brought a gun, zip ties, body armor, and a helmet to the Capitol, presumably to try to take hostages in an attempt to keep Trump in office after he lost, pardoned by Donald Trump. Daniel Joseph D.J. Rodriguez, sentenced to over 12 years. He repeatedly tased Officer Mike Fanone, shocking him in the neck multiple times and causing him to lose consciousness and have a heart attack. He was pardoned by Donald Trump. Patrick McCaughey III, sentenced to 90 months. He assaulted police, beat their faces and bodies with riot shields and batons that he stole for them, pardoned by Donald Trump. Peter Francis Stager, sentenced to 4 years and 4 months. He pled guilty to assaulting an officer with a deadly weapon, on video declaring every single one of those Capitol law enforcement officers, death is the remedy. Those are his words. That is the only remedy they get. Pardoned by Donald Trump. Julian Cater, sentenced to 6 years, attacked Officer Brian Sicknick with pepper spray. Officer Sicknick died the next day after suffering 2 strokes. Edward Jake Lang was on trial for 11 charges, including swinging a baseball bat at officers. In addition to his January 6 charges, he began organizing a nationwide network of armed militias in all 50 states, pardoned by Donald Trump. Mr. Speaker, criminals pardoned were not tourists. They were not peaceful. They were violent criminals. And here's just one example. Daniel Ball's case was dismissed today, and he was released from jail. Why was he in jail? He was being held in pretrial detention because of what a judge described as, quote, some of the most violent and serious offenses of any of the charges being brought against participants in the January 6th events, end quote. That includes hurling an explosive device into the Lower West Terrace tunnel of the Capitol, the scene of some of the most egregious violence against police that day. Some officers suffered from hearing loss for months. But get this, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Ball has already been arrested again on federal gun charges. And he was already a 2-time convicted felon for, and I quote, domestic violence battery by strangulation and resisting law enforcement with violence. Yeah, he already arrested again. This is who the president pardoned. This is why my Republican friends are silent, because this is indefensible. And I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record a political article entitled, Trump Freed a January 6th Defendant Charged with Assaulting Police. DOJ had him arrested again on a gun charge. No, I'm not yielding. You have more time than I do. All these people pardoned, and not a word from the other side.
Without objection.
I reserve my time.
Without objection. The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have the whole number, the total number, but how many murderers had their sentences commuted by then President Joe Biden? Do you know? How many was it? Let's see, Biden commuted the sentences of 2,500 drug offenders, clemency to 37 of the 40 people on death row, one of which shot 2 FBI agents, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, you're pretty quick to point the finger at the gentleman that was the 45th and now the 47th President of the United States. But I would suggest to you that Donald Trump is the President of the United States today and sitting in the White House today because your policies are so bad, because you put illegal immigrants and their rights above the rights of American citizens. So, again, Biden commuted a lot of sentences of a lot of drug offenders and a lot of people that committed murder. So I don't think you should be pointing the finger at what the 47th President of the United States did when the 46th President of the United States is the one that let people who shot FBI agents out. I reserve.
Yeah.
Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair. The gentleman from Georgia reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the best we can get from the gentleman is whataboutism. I mean, he can criticize President Biden, but he can't bring himself to criticize President Trump. He's afraid. And that's the problem. All my Republican friends are in fear that if they question anything that this guy does, that somehow they themselves will be punished. But he didn't even get his facts right on the Pelletier issue. The former U.S. attorney who prosecuted Mr. Pelletier wrote in a letter to President Biden, and I quote, "The prosecution and continued incarceration of Mr. Pelletier was and is unjust," and unquote. He also said, and I quote again, "I believe that a grant of executive clemency would serve the best interests of justice and the best interests of our country," end quote. And again, this is coming from the man who prosecuted him. And he also says that we were not able to prove that Mr. Pelletier personally committed any of the offenses that happened on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I contrast that, Mr. Speaker, contrast that with the nation seeing the criminals that Trump pardoned assault cops on live TV. Please, I ask my friends across the aisle, find me one prosecutor, one of the cop beaters that Trump pardoned who regret their conviction. Which one of Trump's pardoned criminals have already served nearly 50 years in prison? And by the way, Pelletier is 80 years old and he's dying. And he was not pardoned, by the way. So you're wrong on that. His sentence was commuted so he could die at home with an ankle bracelet on. And this was done only after faith and human rights leaders like the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela, Pope Francis begged for his release for years. So to say this is remotely the same is a joke. Why can't my Republican friends just say that what Trump did by pardoning vicious, violent criminals was wrong? Yeah, and I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New Mexico, a member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Ledger Fernandez.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, we should absolutely hold immigrants accountable when they commit a crime, especially when it's against a law enforcement officer. But there are already existing laws for the detention and deportation of immigrants who commit violent crimes. But what we're talking about today is that we must hold convicted felons accountable for attacking our very own Capitol Police. In this very building, January 6th insurrectionists brutally attacked our Capitol Police and other law enforcement officers. More than 140 cops suffered injuries and went to the hospital. 5 police officers died. President Trump just pardoned the violent thugs who were convicted of those attacks. Shame, and as we'd say in Spanish, sin vergüenza. If Republicans were truly concerned about attacks on law enforcement, they would denounce those pardons. We just heard about the violence that was inflicted and about the violent offenders who committed that. I'm asking my Republican colleagues to also keep in mind the faces and the names of those who were brutally attacked. When you walk into this building and you walk past those Capitol Police who are protecting you today, do you tell them, good morning? You should also tell them, I'm sorry. I am sorry that my president pardoned the people who beat you. I am sorry and I denounce those attacks because I honor you. But they do not seem to have the courage to say I'm sorry to those police officers. It is hypocrisy to say you care about law enforcement if you don't denounce those pardons. Those violent criminals who Trump describes as peaceful and loving are being...
Gentlelady.
Yield 30 additional seconds.
Gentlelady's recognized for additional 30 seconds.
Those violent criminals who Trump describes as peaceful and loving are being released into our communities. We've seen the videos of the attacks, the shouts, the pending, Officer Fanons and so many others, their cries for help. It was on video. Americans remember it. I ask my colleagues to remember it. See those videos. The convicted felons were not peaceful. I urge my colleagues to denounce the pardons and to vote against this rule. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this rule is about the Lake and Riley Act and the Fix Our Forest Act, and I hope people will vote for it. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Again, Mr. Speaker, not a word about what happened in this place on January 6th. I just can't bring himself to do it. But, Mr. Speaker, I have a question, and that is, why won't you install the plaque honoring the brave members of law enforcement who protect us on January 6th? I mean, a lot of my colleagues may not know this, but Congress actually passed a law, Public Law 117-103, on requiring the plaque to be installed on the west front of the Capitol before March 15th, 2023. So for 21 months now, almost 2 years, this Speaker has refused to honor the Capitol Police and other law enforcement by installing the plaque that we all voted for. I know it exists, Mr. Speaker. I've actually seen photos of it, so I know it exists. I've seen photos. Why is the delay? Why won't you put it up, Mr. Speaker? And I think I know. I think I know why. Because Republicans don't want to honor the police who were hurt and who died after that attack. Maybe the gentleman from Georgia can explain why the plaque has yet to be installed. I won't hold my breath. But instead, let me read the plaque, Mr. Speaker, so Speaker Johnson and others know what it says. And it says, on behalf of a grateful Congress, this plaque honors the extraordinary individuals who bravely protected and defended this symbol of democracy on January 6, 2021. Their heroism will never be forgotten. And because Republicans will not, I want to take a moment to thank all the agencies that are listed on this plaque who are being disrespected by this leadership. By refusing to honor them. So I want to say thank you to the United States Capitol Police. Thank you to the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia, Arlington County, Virginia Police Department, Fairfax County, Virginia Police Department, Maryland Department of State Police, Metro Transit Police Department, Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, Montgomery County, Maryland Department of Police, New Jersey State Police, Prince George's County, Maryland Police Department, Prince William County, Virginia Police Department, Virginia State Police, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Homeland Security, Federal Bureau of Investigation, National Guard Bureau, Pentagon Force Protection Agency, United States Marshal Service, United States Park Police, United States Secret Service. Thank you to all the officers from all those agencies who were here that day to protect our country, to protect all of us. I appreciate you, and you should know that a lot of Americans have your back, even if this president and the Republicans do not. I reserve.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I too want to thank all of the law enforcement and first responders that protect this country on a daily basis. And Mr. Speaker, we know the polls show that the majority of them voted for Donald Trump. And with that, I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I would just say to the gentleman, to say what he just said, but not reference what happened that day, and not acknowledge the pain that it has caused so many families, so many people who we work with every day who protect us. I have to say that's a little bit much. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, the distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Scanlon.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. It is disappointing but unsurprising that House Republicans have made it their top priority in their new Congress to pass a bill, H.R. 28, designed to generate headlines rather than solve actual problems. Now, I've spoken on the serious flaws in this bill several times, including last night in the Rules Committee. But it is worth noting that since the House last considered this bill, it's been altered with an increasingly ironic amendment. The amendment added mandatory imprisonment for people accused of assaulting a law enforcement officer. I say this amendment is ironic because yesterday, just hours after taking the oath of office, President Trump granted mass pardons for over 1,200 January 6 MAGA rioters who'd been convicted and ordered the dismissal of cases of hundreds more, including hundreds who assaulted police with bats, poles, bear spray, explosives, and other weapons. Over 140 officers were hurt that day, with injuries including crushed spinal discs, traumatic brain injuries, heart attacks, and strokes, while they bravely defended the Capitol and those who work here. Some lost their lives or became permanently disabled after sustaining injuries and horrific trauma at the hands of fellow citizens during the MAGA attack on January 6, 2021. In issuing those pardons, President Trump put the presidential seal of approval on political violence, so long as it supports him, and even if it's directed against law enforcement. And just to be clear, there was no case-by-case review of these convictions. This is a blanket pardon. Already, we're seeing the fruits of that incredibly dangerous act of pardoning people who attack the Constitution, this Capitol, and the police officers and people in it. Among those attackers are dangerous felons who are not chastened or remorseful or reformed. They feel emboldened. One of them, Daniel Charles Bell, has just been rearrested one day after his January 6 case was dismissed on new weapons charges. Another, the infamous MAGA supporter known as the QAnon shaman, tweeted Monday, "I got a pardon, baby. Thank you, President Trump. Now I'm going to buy some mother effing guns." These pardons show an utter disrespect for law enforcement, our criminal justice system, and the rule of law. They have been rightly condemned by the International Order of Chiefs of Police and the Fraternal Order of Police, among other police organizations. But virtually every House Republican has turned their back on our police and cowered in silence rather than denounce this shameful decision to put those criminals back on our streets. I continue to oppose this rule and this bill. I seek unanimous consent to introduce into the record the joint International Association of Chiefs of Police and the Fraternal Order of Police statement on the recent presidential pardons dated January 21st, 2025.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask the gentleman from Massachusetts, is he prepared to close or does he have more speakers? He is prepared to close. I'll reserve.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman has 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to first ask unanimous consent to insert in the record an article from the Wall Street Journal today entitled "Trump Pardons the January 6 Cop Beaters." And the editorial asks, law and order, question mark, back the blue, question mark, what happened to that GOP? And again, I appreciate the gentleman thanking—
Without objection.
Thanking in general our law enforcement officials, but it is troubling that he can't bring himself to address what happened that day. My Republican friends are afraid to debate and to discuss what happened on that day, and it is so disappointing in so many ways. Mr. Speaker, January 6th was not a tourist day. It was a horrific attack on the police who protect our country. And I saw with my own eyes the officers with blood on their faces, battered and bruised from fighting off a violent mob. So many of them had to go to the hospital to get stitches, to get medical care. They were severely wounded. And I'll never forget the smell of tear gas or the horror on people's faces as we were rushed out of this chamber. I watched from the Speaker's chair as Republicans cowered and hid for their lives that day, letting the Capitol Police run to the front lines to protect them. And on Monday, Republicans let out the violent political extremists who did all of this. Republicans let them back out on the streets. Trump called them patriots. He called them hostages. There's nothing patriotic about beating police officers with flagpoles, Mr. Speaker. The patriots were the law enforcement officers who protected this institution. There's nothing patriotic about the KKK, the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys. Trump pardoned them. There's nothing patriotic about viciously assaulting police officers. There's nothing patriotic about bashing heads and breaking into the Capitol building because of a deranged fantasy that you're going to overthrow the government. There's nothing patriotic about any of that. But Donald Trump doesn't care. He pardoned them because he only cares about him. Mr. Speaker, where is your outrage over any of this? Where is your spine? To be silent after these pardons is terrible, and it speaks for itself. And as for me, I stand with the police officers who were here that day. I stand with the officers who were trying to maintain law and order. I stand with the people who are disgusted that Donald Trump is opening the doors and letting out the criminals who attack them. I don't hear a single Republican brave enough to come to this floor and condemn these pardons. Not a single one. It's cowardice. It's hypocrisy. They are rewarding political violence and setting the stage for much, much worse things to come. You heard from Representative Scanlon. Some of them are bragging about how they're going out to buy more guns. What is that about? Violent, dangerous people who beat cops, who tried to kill members of this body, who tried to kill our staff. They're let back on the streets by Donald Trump. It's a disgrace. You should be ashamed, Mr. Speaker. You own this now. You know that. And the law enforcement officers of this country know it too. They're watching and they will remember. There's a great conservative, Edmund Burke, who once said, you know, all that it takes for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing, to be silent. Well, I, for one, am not going to be silent. We're going to continue to talk about this until we get it right in this country, in this chamber. I can't speak for my friends on the other side of the aisle, but if today is any indication, you're just hoping and pray that it goes away, that everybody forgets. But we will never forget what happened here on January 6th. The American people will never forget. And the American people did not vote for this. They did not vote to let these violent criminals back on the streets. So I urge a no vote, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to close and yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this vote is on the rule to advance H.R. 471, the Fix Our Forest Act, and S5, the Lake and Riley Act, regardless of what you've listened to if you've been watching this over the last hour. And so this week, the House has the ability to advance significant legislation in the House of Representatives. That's our job. The Fix Our Forest Act can mark a return to active forest management and return resilience to overgrown, fire-prone forested lands. And I'd be willing to bet that that piece of legislation probably passes in a bipartisan manner. The Lake and Riley Act will ensure that criminals who illegally cross our borders and endanger our communities are detained and deported, while also giving states the ability to bring civil action against any federal official in the future should they refuse to enforce our country's immigration laws and put American citizens at risk by refusing to do so. Again, I want to thank the law enforcement officers, the Capitol Police specifically, and all of those who take care of us on a daily basis, And I send my condolences to Lake and Riley's family. I look forward to voting yes on this bill and sending it to President Trump's desk for his signature. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting yes on the previous question, yes on the rule, and then I hope they'll vote yes on the legislation. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.
Gentleman from Georgia yields back. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess subject to the call of the Chair.